Imagine the largest democracy in the world and world's oldest democracy coming together. Well, it happened. They did come together in the past, which resulted in the former becoming a colony and the latter its colonizer. Centuries down the line, India is still struggling for its reputation and recognition. Why? My guest today is a member of House of Lords. He is considered as one of the top 100 influencers on India-UK relations. He is also the founding chairman of India-UK Business Council. The question is, what happened to all the efforts he made over the years to bring these two nations together? How do you rate the India-UK relationship on a scale of 1 to 10 before I delve deep into the subject?
The Indo-UK relationship is a long-standing, 400-year-old relationship that has always been very, very close. And I used to say when I was founding chair of the UK-India Business Council that if there are two countries the UK has a special relationship with, one is the United States of America and the other one is India. And that was the case. That still should be the case. But at the moment, things are not as good as they should be.
Why do you think so?
For a number of reasons. I think that I remember going back to Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron. I've accompanied all of them to India on their visits. The atmosphere, the sentiments have been always very, very positive. There's every single visit. They've been positive. We're building, making things stronger, making things better. Unfortunately, under the current Prime Minister, starting with her visit to India a couple of years ago, things have not been as good as they could and should be.
So what is the reason behind it? And do you also feel disheartened? Because I know that you have been the founding chairman of UK-India Business Council and you have been working over the years to make sure that these two nations come together. Lord Bilimoria, do you feel disheartened with the attitude of the current government?
I feel that things could be so much better and they could be resolved very, very quickly by certain initiatives by the British government. And a lot of it has to do with immigration, has to do with visas, has to do with movement of workers, has to do with international students. These are things that matter. And on the one hand, we have the backdrop of Brexit, which is now 2 years since it happened. And that 2 years of uncertainty that has been created for the whole world dealing with the UK, and India in particular. I always used to promote the UK as a gateway for Indian companies to the whole of Europe. And that's exactly what's happened. Most Indian companies that operate in the EU use the UK as their headquarters. Now, of course, the uncertainty that's created, if Britain, and I say if Britain leaves the European Union, do Indian companies now have to find another headquarters within the EU, as well as having a base over here? All that uncertainty has not helped. Then there's all this talk by people like Dr. Liam Fox about doing free trade deals with India. And
which is not going to happen until unless Britain decides its own fate with regards to what happens with its relationship with the European Union, whether it goes out on the timeline which has been fixed, which is 2019 March. But my question is, that why does the UK government treat India as a vassal state? I mean, at one hand, you allow Chinese people to come to this country. On the other hand, you want to have trade relationship with India. You don't want the people to come in here.
So
what is wrong with the policy?
There is an acknowledgement, and there always has been, that China is, quite frankly, almost a superpower. And there's always been a kowtowing to China. And under George Osborne, the previous Chancellor, huge efforts were made to build bridges with China. And of course, China is this giant that will be the largest economy in the world soon. But of course, there has always been an acknowledgement that India is also a global emerging economic superpower. There have been many opportunities. I've asked in Parliament several times the question, why aren't you giving the same to India as you're giving to China? Our tourists, our business visitors pay more than 4 times as high a fee as the Chinese. That's no way to win friends with India. Then on top of that, just recently, we've had another kick in the teeth where India is concerned, where visas for students are concerned. There is a fast-track system which countries like Australia and New Zealand and America and Canada always had access to. Countries like China and India and other countries were excluded from. They just added 11 countries to that list just a few weeks ago. Yep. They included China in that list and they left out India.
Yeah.
How do you think we feel from an Indian point of view that you include China and again you exclude India? And I asked the government a question about this. What answer did they give me? A written answer from the minister saying, we're monitoring it and we will review this from time to time. I asked, why did you exclude India? They did not answer the question. So this discrimination against India is absolutely shocking.
So what should India do in this case? I mean, we know the problem within the mentality or the attitude of the government here to treat somehow India as an inferior state. I don't know why. What should India do in this case?
Well, again, what is difficult to understand is you get Dr. Liam Fox, the trade minister, saying we want to do a free trade deal with India. And, well, free trade deals are more than duties and tariffs. Free trade deals are also about movement of people, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made this very clear. So if Britain is not seen to be fair when it comes to the movement of people, whether it's students, whether it's tourists, whether it's business, a free trade agreement with India is for the birds. And where India is concerned, far more important to India is a EU-India free trade agreement, which they've been working on now for many, many years. That is far more important to India than a UK-India free trade agreement. Once there's more of a fairness when it comes to these immigrations, once Britain starts, very simply, Britain could address this tomorrow. Bring our multiple entry visas for tourists and business in line with China at £85 a year. Remove international students to net migration figures. Bring in Indian students on the fast track for visas like China has been. Allow Indian restaurants to bring in the chefs and staff they need from South Asia. Allow Indian IT companies that are working here to bring in the people the British business and the British public services need. Allow the NHS to bring in the doctors and even the nurses that it needs from India. Show that we're welcome to India, to do business with India. Then the picture would change completely.
What do you think is happening after 1 year from now? Do you think there would be a change in the attitude of the British government? They would realize that, okay, we are no more aligned towards the EU and therefore we need new partners, and there might be a silver lining for India in leaving the European Union.
Well, they've been saying the whole mantra of the Brexiteers and the Leave campaign is this is about Britain going global. Well, we've always been a global trading nation. Britain has one of the highest levels of inward investment of any country, in the top 2 in the world, a recipient of inward investment. Britain is one of the most open economies in the world. The whole of the Commonwealth, including India, makes up less than 10% of Britain's trade, 9% of Britain's trade. Now, going global, when I've got more than 2/3 already through and with the EU, am I going to sacrifice that to go after the 10%? No, I've got to do both. I've got to try and grow my Indian trade. And it's not the EU that's holding me back at all. And saying that the EU is stopping Britain going global, we're already global. So this is an absolute nonsense. And try and say, well, India, if we leave the European Union, it's going to be much better for you, India. Well, India's still got its priority to do its EU-India free trade agreement, which is 500 million people versus 65 billion people, which is countries like Germany, France, Italy, all of whom do huge amounts of business with India.
So are you suggesting that India should be looking forward to EU-India free trade agreement rather than focusing on UK-India relations?
That's not what I'm saying. I've heard from the horse's mouth, very top in India, the priority of India is the EU-India free trade agreement.
Yeah, because Arun Jaitley recently said that they will be going simultaneously.
They may go simultaneously, but they've been working on the EU one for much longer. And the EU one economically is far more important to India.
But personally, what would you suggest? Do you think that it's better for India to sort of align towards the EU because nothing much is happening with regards to India-UK relations?
There is a lot happening. This is the sad thing, that there is a lot of good happening. As I said, there's so many Indian companies invested here. So many British companies have invested, whether it's Vodafone, whether it's BP, whether it's HSBC, whether it's Standard Chartered, on a large scale, SMEs, with Cobra Beer through my joint venture partners, Molson Coors. We have 3 breweries in India. So there's a lot that is going on already on an investment basis. The trade figures could and should be much higher. There's a lot of scope for that to increase.
Yeah, but one might counter saying that they are welcoming only wealthy people from India. They're not giving the opportunity for the Indians, average Indians, as in they give to the people of Europe or even Chinese for that matter, Lord Billimoria.
Well, this is the other thing. The Indians that have come over here, the Indian diaspora of 1.5 million people in the UK, is the most successful ethnic minority community in the whole of Britain. We are the ambassadors for India. We're very proud of India. We want the UK-India relationship to be really close. We want it to flourish. we feel we're just scratching the surface. If one thing could change that would change the perception, would be changing these economically illiterate immigration rules that the British government had. Once those are changed, the whole perception changes, and India is welcomed, as opposed to at the moment there's a hostile immigration environment. There's no question the environment is hostile, and India feels that, and I don't blame India for feeling that.
Lord Bilimoria, thank you so much for talking to us. It was a pleasure, sir.
Pleasure.
There is an interesting paradox in India-UK relations. At one hand, the UK dangles a carrot of recognizing India as a powerful nation. On the other hand, it smacks the rear with a stick of harsh immigration policy. Welcome to Carrot and Stick School of International Relations. Anilesh Kumar, Democracy News Live, London.